Hi, I'm Liz.
And I'm Marie, and this is Mock It, a podcast from MetroStar where we take a deep dive into UX design, trending design topics, and making our work transform the government. Let's get started.
Yeah, so today we have a super fun topic. We'll be talking about UX design and how it can help tackle climate change. And today we have one of our awesome MetroStar colleagues joining us as a guest. Do you want to take a second to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Elisha Hardy. I've been at MetroStar since March, so pretty new. Before that, I was doing actually focusing on farming, but for my professional UX background, I worked at a couple education technology companies in New York City and some design agencies as well.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. Like we can jump right into this because it's, I've known that you've been at New York City, but how did you go from the city to farming? And then we'll get into the climate change.
Sure. Yeah. So I was in New York City, being a professional for several years. But I guess I kind of got to a point where I needed a break. So I had been interested in farming for a while, and I just happened to find this like farm training program in California. So I was like, all right, this is what I need. I'm going to do this. So it was like because both I could take a break from working and also do something I was interested in. So I did that. It was like a 3-month farm program where you like live on the farm, and they teach you everything. You have classes every day and you also do farm work every day. So it's like literally the whole thing. And then after that, I just loved farming. So I just kept doing it for 6 years. And I also did, UX work on the side. So that's kind of how I got into farming. And then through that, of course, like once you get into farming, you kind of just understand like the system that we live in and the climate that we live in. You have to pay attention to the weather and everything when you're farming.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So with farming, do you have animals and like crops, livestock and crops, or just crops?
Oh, that's a great question.
So at the farm that I was in California, we had goats, chickens, and then regular vegetable production.
Yeah.
But now that I'm back in Indiana, I'll only have vegetables and chickens.
No, that's cool though.
Yeah.
Yeah, use the chicken poop to fertilize.
Yes, exactly.
I know a little bit about the gardening part. Yeah.
That's part of the holistic design system of a farm, actually.
Yeah.
There's a lot of parallels between farming and designing.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh man, I was gonna do a tangent about little chickens, but I'll keep us on track. So then, with that's a great lead into how did you realize you were passionate about climate change and that design could help with climate change and farming, and sort of how did you connect the dots among all of your passions?
Sure. So, once you're kind of aware of climate change and what the problems are, then, my designer brain starts thinking about solutions. That's what we do, right? We try to understand the problem and we try to come up with solutions. We try to understand like who are the players and what are their roles and what are processes and systems. And, that's what design is. So to me, that's the connection is design is a mechanism for solving problems. And climate change is a messy problem to solve. So we better use our brains to solve the problem. That's the connection.
So we've heard this term environment first designer. So what does it mean to be an environment first designer? And maybe if you could teach us about what that term also means.
It's also called a climate designer and environment designer. It means that when you're doing any design, that the environment is part of your consideration. Like you have to understand that we live as humans in an environment, and any design that we create has to account for a human living in an environment. So that's like the basics of it. But to do that, you first have to understand what are the problems that we're facing in our environment, So like the problem is that we are emitting too much greenhouse gas emissions, not the most fun topic, but that's what we're doing as a global human species. We are emitting too much greenhouse gas emissions. And, it's not fun to think about, but we're doing so much that if we don't stop soon, it's going to be a problem for us as a species, which is, not fun to think about. So it really just means that you have to understand that. And so then we understand what are the primary sources of those greenhouse gas emissions? Where is it all coming from? So we have to understand it's from electricity. So every time you turn on the lights, unless you're solar powered, then you're probably using fossil fuels. It's from cars. Every time you drive somewhere, you're emitting fossil fuels. Everything that you buy, and including food, and every product that you buy is created, in a factory that uses fossil fuels. And then everything that we throw away emits some greenhouse gas emissions as well, and is a waste of energy. So it's kind of like just understanding that that's the world we're living in. So in any design that we're working on, you have to consider, how is this impacting the environment and creating or not creating greenhouse gas emissions? So is your design going to use a lot of electricity? Is it going to require a massive amount of car use or transportation? How much energy does whatever you're working on take to produce? How much environmental degradation is going to happen because of whatever it is that you're working on? And does it create waste? And how can any of these things be lessened, essentially? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. One question I do have with, so obviously MetroStar does a lot of government contracting. That's our bread and butter. How, from your expertise, how does this type of design mindset apply to government work? What impact does it have across the different contracts that maybe people at MetroStar might be working on, or just in general?
Sure. So the first thing is the government's been a little slow, but they're just catching up to this. They just released their long-term climate strategy report in December, just this month. No, it was in November. It was last month. Where they finally state that we have to reach net zero emissions by 2050. The government has said this in writing, finally.
Yeah.
They have a report. It's very long. And, in the report, they say the world has already warmed, an average of 1 degree Celsius. And if we don't immediately curtail these emissions, the world will be condemned to nearly triple that level of warming. That's in the report from the government. So to me, that says that they are finally taking notice and caring about this. So I think that we have an opportunity on every single contract that we are on to have an impact. Obviously, there are some places we could have higher impact and more impact, but I think that this is cross-cutting on every single project. So just to go through a few more of the goals, from the government themselves, what they've stated. They say to meet these global milestones, we must retool the global energy economy, transform agricultural systems, halt and reverse deforestation, and decisively address non-carbon dioxide emissions, which they mean methane. They also say that it's going to require an all of society action. They're saying that they recognize that it's going to take a transformation of the entire U.S. economy to get to this net zero. They're focusing on things like half of all light duty cars will be by 2030 will be electric. That's going to be like a mandate. They're focusing on reducing pollution and especially, this was their language, alleviating the pollution burdens disproportionately borne by communities of color, low-income communities, and indigenous communities. They talk about being a leader in research and development on clean technology, batteries, stuff like that. They talk about converting all of the United States to 100% clean electricity by 2035.
Wow.
And they talk about electrifying all end uses. So basically any gas appliance is going to be banned at some point. They're talking about cutting energy waste. So anytime you're using energy, you need to use less of it. It needs to be more efficient. And it needs to be done sustainably. So they're talking about buildings, they're talking about manufacturing, they're talking about your home, and they're talking also about reducing methane, which comes from both landfills and cow farts. So we're talking about eating less cows and making less trash because that creates methane. And they're also talking about CO2 removal, which is a scary thing. So all that to say, the government needs a lot of help to do this. I think there's going to be projects that are going to be focused around data science and helping them do all this from a data standpoint. They're going to need help with progress tracking. So any organizational change is going to need help. They're doing all this change of going from we have all gas cars now to being 100% electric. So that's a process change. They're going to need a lot of research and development tools. They're going to need a lot of guidance and providing assistance to all the agencies. So this is coming from the top. All the agencies now need to implement this. And they're going to need help with procurement. So they're going to need help with procuring more sustainably produced products across the board, and anywhere they're sourcing from should be a better, created product. So that's kind of some of the big things. Another big piece that is in all of this that I've actually personally experienced already at MetroStar is this concept of addressing inequity. I'm sure you guys have heard this before, but the government is, trying to take it more seriously now, I guess. And they're starting to recognize this, and they've started using that language of equity and inclusivity on project proposals even. We recently we responded to an RFP. It was it was a response. It wasn't an RFP, where they were trying to get some information on a WIC proposal, which is the Women and Infant Children. The SNAP program, the food stamp program for them. That program recently got a lot of money because it addresses food insecurity in people who are, lower income. And this is a big piece of the puzzle, when everybody in society is taken care of and can manage their own needs, it's less of a problem on, the planet, because people who are poor can't buy, quality food. They can't buy quality products. They need help. So I think the government is recognizing that people need help, and that the WIC program is part of that.
Oh man, I'm a little taken aback. I mean, I read I knew about the highlights of this report that came out, but I did not do a deep dive by any stretch. Now I'm like, oh my gosh, they really covered a lot in that report, and
They sure did.
no small feat getting.
No, definitely not.
No, it's not. It's like they said, it's all of society. So that's kind of why I'm like, we have an opportunity to address this in everything we do.
So then with that, with a focus on sort of shifting it a little bit back to bringing it back to design. So when we are working on projects and doing a design approach, what shifts need to happen to have more of an earth-friendly designs, or what does that process look like to you, and what tips might you have for those who might be on some of these new projects to meet these initiatives?
Sure. I mean, I mean, the mindset shift is first that, we have to understand and accept the reality that we're living in. We're living on a planet with finite resources and we can't use those resources indefinitely, and we have to stop emitting greenhouse gases. So it's like we have to recognize that. And then we also have to have a goal of bringing in the well-being of all people and the environment into everything that we do. Like that's kind of like our overarching goal is well-being of all people and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. That's the mindset shift. As far as what we can do, we have some frameworks that we talked about actually in the climate designers course that I took. So we have the climate justice framework, which is really just a way of walking through a design to understand if it's addressing things from the perspective of social, racial, environmental, and economic justice. So it's kind of an in-depth process you can go through. But that's a process. We also have behavior change frameworks. So if you're working on a project where you understand that the context of the project is that, there's this behavior change that we're trying to address, which a lot of what this is behavior change. We have several frameworks for doing that. They're called emotional appeals, social influence, choice architecture. Those are the top three. There's a couple other ones. But I could send out the link for more details on all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And there's also something called behavior mapping, which is understanding what causes behaviors and how to influence behaviors. So the basics of it is you have to understand the motivation, the ability, and the prompt of a behavior that you want. So does someone have the right motivation? Do they have the ability to do it? And are they getting prompted in some way to do this behavior? So those are kind of some of the design framework things we can use. We also have something called 3 horizons thinking. This is kind of like a systems thinking framework, but it's basically like if you know what the future should be, like the third horizon, we call it the third horizon, and we're living in the first horizon. The second horizon is the little things you can do to get to the third horizon. So if we know we want 100% clean electric cars by 2030, what are the little things we have to do to get there? It's another kind of systems framework that you can think through. Those are the big ones that I have, but there's lots more.
No, that's so cool.
Yeah. So you sort of touched upon this right when you were getting into the frameworks. So could you tell us a little bit about the course that you were taking?
Yeah. So I took a course through Terra.do called Climate Designers, and it's run by these people who've been teaching classes on climate design for a while and also have industry experience. And it was, I want to say 10 to 15 people in the course. It was like a 6-week course, but you also get connected to a network of other designers, climate designers. They have like a network of 800 people at this point. So through the course, you get connected to that network. And they just did lessons every week and like mini homework assignments. And then we had like a project at the end. But it was really great. The teachers were like very kind, great people, very knowledgeable. And they also, they gave us a lot of, knowledge and frameworks to work with, but also they kind of helped empower us to feel like we could be leaders, to be design leaders on this issue, because they kind of recognize that's what's needed in the world. We need people like me, people like you, like everywhere in the world. We need people who are like fighting the fight.
So speaking of fighting the good fight, what about some obstacles that you faced, and like have clients kind of, I don't want to say bought in because that's not the sentiment I want to make, but do clients see the importance of making these small changes, these incremental changes to then hit these sort of larger initiatives that have been set forth? And then do you have like a do you have like a tagline or a pitch or your elevator speech that you might use to get clients on board?
That's a good one. So because the government, has that long-term strategy, I think that's a big win in our favor. Like any project that comes up where you have if just say like, oh, we should do this because, it's climate, you can point to the report from the government. Hey, they said we got to get to zero emissions, So I think that's a huge help. But that being said, there will be people who probably don't agree with it and who think that it's a hoax and, all those things. There's going to be people who fight it, I'm sure. And so I think what we talked about in our class was that what we need to do is center ourselves on our values, things like compassion and well-being, because nobody can argue with that. So you can't say like, well, we should have a more compassionate society and we should do these things to be more compassionate and take care of everybody. Like nobody can argue. So if we're always fighting for the well-being of others and the planet, then we'll win. We'll be fine.
Nice. And then
so heartwarming.
I know.
So just being in the holidays, it's like, don't be Scrooge with it,
Yeah, that was one of the greatest things about my teachers. Actually, they kind of imparted that message. Is it's easy to get like depressed and sad and angry about climate change and all the problems in the world, but that doesn't do anything if you're just angry and depressed. We have to think about a better future, and we all have to work together to create that better future together.
So I don't mean to put you on the spot with this question because I know you recently just finished the course up, but have you implemented any of the things that you've learned in the course in your current work?
I think just being aware of that language around inclusivity and equity definitely came up with that WIC project that I was mentioning. Or it was really just a response to a proposal. But if we got that project, it would be, that would be a big piece of it, is layering in equity into that. Nothing specific yet, but it just came up, recently.
Yeah, and you just finished your course, so that wasn't like a gotcha question. Just
For sure.
Just so excited.
Yeah, I know. This is super cool.
Yeah.
So as we kind of start to wrap up our discussion with you, what are some small things that designers can do right now? Maybe like if they don't have access to take the classes that you suggested, that could help them create more eco-friendly designs?
Sure. I mean, the first thing I think is to be pretty well educated on the depth of the issues and what really needs to change, because we all kind of have to agree and be on the same page about what the changes are that are necessary. And then be the change that you want to see in the world. It's so cheesy, but it's true.
Yeah, I love that.
Lead by example.
Yeah. Isn't that like Gandhi, right? Says that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lead by example.
Yeah.
Yes. And another thing is, talk to your family and friends about this kind of stuff, because one thing we talked about in our course actually is that we're most influenced by the people that we're closest to. So true change comes from being influenced by the people that are in your closest circle. Find your role, like what part of this climate change, ecosystem, whatever you care about. Like I care about farming, but maybe you care about transportation, or maybe you care about energy, like whatever, it doesn't matter. Just pick the thing that you feel more of a passion about. Because as you can see, it requires changes in everything.
Yeah.
Another thing you can do is join an organization that's addressing this issue. One of the biggest things we talked about in that course was that together we can be a lot stronger than alone. Like you shouldn't be trying to do anything alone at this point. Just join an organization that's doing things already. And then the last couple things, I don't have tons of examples, but they're all like designy things. There's things called like brandalism and culture jamming and fauvertising. I don't know if you guys have heard of any of these terms.
No, can you dive into them?
Oh yeah. Marie just started like really excited.
What is this?
I could also send you examples from my course, because we talked about this in the course.
Perfect.
But so like brandalism is like people on Twitter who like post things to like I don't know, like BP's Twitter page that say like how they screwed something up,
Yeah.
and they're just like hurting their image because they're posting it on Twitter. There's lots of stuff like that. Culture jamming is similar things. And another thing we talked about was civil disobedience, which actually came up very funnily enough. I'm on the Sustainability Commission for my local city. And we were talking about making a change, and they were saying like, oh, well, we can't make this change because the state made some law that we can't do this. Oh, it was for banning single-use plastic. The state said we're not allowed to do that. So my little city can't do that. And people on our commissioner were like, well, let's just be civil disobedience and let's just do it anyway.
Right.
So, there's things like that. You can just go against the norms.
Nice.
Those are all really
exciting.
Cool. Yeah.
Maybe I'm going to come to your city.
Yeah. But that's actually a good point. Like a follow-up question is, if someone wanted to join like the sustainability committee for their county, their city or something like that, how did you get involved with that? Like, do you like just reach out to your rep, or,
I just went, I think, to the city's like website. Your city, wherever you live, should have a website unless you're in the middle of nowhere. But it probably has a website, and they probably have a sustainability commission if you're on the East Coast. If you're in some rural place in like Georgia, maybe not. But, if you're in the East Coast, you probably should have one. And then, sometimes they have openings. Basically, they have like a commission that has openings. So then I applied to the opening, and because my background is both farming, but also I'm from this area, they wanted me on the commission. So I had some connection to the area and some background in this space.
Cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's definitely if people want to get involved locally, that's a really great tip of how to do it.
It's a very good way to do it. Yeah. I mean, and even if it's not the city, if there's not a commission, every city probably has initiatives related to something you're interested in. There's community gardens all over the town that I live in. There's there's programs for homeless, anything you're interested in, there's something there.
Yeah, when we lived in Ann Arbor is very much like that, because it's college towns and stuff like that. So just like you were saying, anything you want to get involved with, but also we live in a major metropolitan city with DC, so that's also we have that benefit too. Yeah, this is very interesting.
Yeah.
This is like super cool. I feel like we learned like a lot of new terms, and we will, if you want to send us those links, we will post those links in our podcast description, so people can feel free to read our the description online, and we'll post the links that you suggest, and then people can read a little bit more and reach out with questions.
Cool. Sounds good.
Cool. So first off, we want to just thank you so much for your time. Like I said, this is I'm overwhelmed by all of this information with oh, we got to get on this.
It's okay. Don't be overwhelmed.
Yeah, I know. I really liked your point where you're find that niche in this whole big ecosystem of it. Find the niche that you're interested in. Made it a lot more tangible than when you listed off everything. I was like, oh my gosh. By 2050, whoa, this is a lot. But find what you're interested in to make the impact with an organization.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So again, thank you. And then this is Mock It. Don't forget to subscribe, and share with your friends. And join us next time. As always, if you're interested in learning more about how government and tech collide, visit MetroStar.com and follow us on our socials.